The Writer's Dream. Our show is a forum for writers who can talk about how they wrote their books, how they publish their books, and how they market their books. We would love you to visit our page on Facebook. We have a page called The Writer's Dream. Ask questions, take a look at some of our authors. We're also on YouTube. We're coming on 2 years now with The Writer's Dream, and we have probably about 50 authors. And you can find authors in any genre. You can find authors who talk about marketing techniques. They talk about how to get an agent, how to get a publisher. Some of them read their works. It's really pretty interesting if you're into writing and reading. Today's guest is Suzanne Litrel. And Suzanne is the author of the Jackie Tempo Time Travel series. Her 3 books are
Jackie Tempo and the Emperor's Seal, Jackie Tempo and the Ghost of Zumbi, and Jackie Tempo and the House of Wisdom.
And what happened when I met Suzanne, who pardon me if I call her Jackie every once in a while, because we have a hard time separating ourselves from our characters. But I met her at an event in Planting Fields Arboretum on Long Island, and I looked at her book cover, and then I was so intrigued by the House of Wisdom book cover that I read the back of it, and usually when you're at an event, you're busy selling your own books, and I said, good grief, she's doing something very similar to me. And what we found out when we had our initial conversation was that we have a similar career path.
We do.
What is that career path?
Well, I think both of us have, at the heart of it, yes, we have these great adventurous stories to tell, but as teachers, former teachers, we have, I would say we have an ulterior motive, actually.
Always.
Always. Yes, indeed.
Yeah. So we're the former teachers who have become writers. And I am learning as I get more and more into this profession that there are a lot of us.
There are.
Really. I am Linda Maria Frank. I am the author of Annie Tillery Mysteries, and my 2 books are The Madonna Ghost and Girl with Pencil Drawing. And we also share another common goal, and our common goal has to do with young women. Would you like to talk about that, Suzanne?
I would. I think as a mother, as a teacher, and as a woman, one of the things that I've always sought out were strong female role models in fiction, especially in teen fiction. I had a great conversation with a friend the other day who asked me, well, what was your favorite book? And we're considering it's National Library and Librarians Week. And I thought back to 4th grade, how my 4th grade librarian introduced me to A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine L'Engle.
Oh, yes.
And that story opened up the world to me on so many different levels, but particularly because it was the heroine, or the protagonist, Meg Murray, a young, awkward girl, really rescued her family, her father, her brother, saved the world, really. And who would have thunk?
Investigating mitochondria.
Exactly. Exactly.
Who would have thunk, right.
Exactly. And so, and that is something that drives me in writing. So, and this is something that we definitely share. We have these protagonists, are Jackie Tempo and Annie Tillery, who are pretty strong-minded girls. Different slants, of course. My genre is historical fiction. Jackie Tempo travels back across time and space, and she's looking for her parents, who are off on their own quest. They're trying to track down this would-be tyrant of the universe. And through the aid of a magic book or a mystical book from Samarkand, Central Asia, she finds herself in China, 1521.
Where did she get the book?
She got the book from her aunt's house. Another thing I think we share, another component we share. Yes, aunts are wonderful people. But there were 3 books, and in a library, as a matter of fact. Her Aunt Isabel had this beautiful, incredible library. Of course, it had to be mahogany, floor-to-ceiling shelves, etc.
With Persian rugs on the floor.
Persian rugs, absolutely. I think that was actually my dream room. You know, when we write, isn't it true that we write the world we'd like to envision?
My beach house in the Madonna Ghost is my dream house.
Absolutely. So she finds this book, and she gets transported back to Ming China. That's 1521. In the second book, she finds herself going back in time to Brazil and a runaway slave community. And in the third book, she finds herself in Baghdad. And on all 3, you know, again, the ulterior motive, especially with the protagonist, I wanted a strong young lady who was vulnerable. She's not sure where her parents are. Teens are vulnerable. It's difficult to live on this planet anyway, regardless of your age. And she's on a quest, and aren't we all? So,
Yes, so it's like
Yeah.
it's almost like a teenage journey
yes.
story.
Yes.
And journey stories, journey myths are always very interesting.
Exactly.
So the book enables her to do the time travel.
Yes.
There's magic in the book that
Yes.
enables her. How did she find that magic?
Well, she opened a book. She opened the book, and it was interesting when I was writing. This is the best part about writing. For me, I never know what's really going to happen until I'm in the middle of it. When I'm in the thick of it, it's that this is where we're going with the story. And in fact, she opens a book in the first one. This is how she finds it, and her aunt has said, "Wait, stop," and she finds herself going back in time. And I guess you could say my books are kind of like magic treehouse for anyone 12 through 99 or beyond.
Yes. Well,
So-
that's the joy of creating a
Yes.
strong female role
Yes.
model. Now, you have a very interesting background, which has enabled you to write these stories about different parts of the world. Would you like to tell us something about that?
Sure. I grew up overseas. I was born in New York, lived in Huntington for the first 2 years of my life, and my
They
father's...
sent you away.
Yes, my
I'm
father's job, yes. Well, I got to leave with my parents, so that's the difference. My father's job took us to Rome and to Singapore and then to Brazil for 8.5 years. I moved back to the United States when I was in my senior year of high school. That was interesting, 1 year of high school in the United States, but it was always a fun time. And I looked at my year in the United States as an adventure in and of itself. So my parents believed very strongly in immersing us in the culture of the country in which we were living. My dad was an executive with General Motors, and I am not thrilled to say that there were many executives, American executives abroad, who wanted to seal themselves off
Yes.
and isolate themselves from the culture in which they were doing business, actually. But my parents took a different stance, and so our friends were Brazilian, they were Italian. My parents went to Malay and Singaporean weddings.
And you
we were
learned the
kinda different.
languages
I did,
as well.
yes. I was introduced to Chinese when I was about 7.
Oh, perfect.
But that was an introduction. I think our teacher actually got sick of us because we sounded so terrible. So this is at the Singapore American School. And then I am fluent in Portuguese. I nearly earned my Brazilian high school diploma. I don't speak a word. I can't decipher Arabic, I'm sorry to say. But yes, and I do have a master's in Chinese studies. I did live in Taiwan and China after college.
How much research went into doing the books?
For the first book, I would say I really reached, I'll tell you, talk about milking your education, because I really mined my background actually in Singapore, and then for my master's and my time in Taiwan. I earned my master's at the University of Michigan, very strong Chinese studies program there. So for that, for this book, the Emperor's Seal took me not too long at all, about 6 weeks. I just start to finish, sat down and let it all come out.
Write what you know.
Exactly. And then in Brazil, I really drew upon my time there as well. I had to do more research about Zumbi of Palmares, who was the chieftain of the runaway slave community. And so that I took some time. For Jackie Temple in the House of Wisdom, I took a leave of absence from my job at Bayshore High School, and I did quite a bit of research. Sort of the farther away I get from the culture, obviously,
Sure.
the more research I have to do.
Well, let me tell you about
Yes.
Annie.
Yes.
Okay, because I really want to get into the concept of the strong female
Yes,
role model.
and there are quite a few similarities, and I was hoping you could share that.
Absolutely. My books are The Madonna Ghost and Girl with Pencil Drawing.
Yes.
And I didn't do much research because I wrote what I knew as well. And in the first book, The Madonna Ghost, it takes place on Fire Island. So here we are on Long Island. What do I know best? Unlike you, my parents had a business here. They had a business in Queens. We never went anywhere.
Except in your imagination.
Because my dad couldn't leave the business. So
Yes.
I had this wanderlust from very, very early on, and I wanted to travel. So I read a lot.
Yes.
And the books that I liked the best were books where people went to other places.
Right.
So, but I started with the Madonna Ghost, and what really got me writing was the fact that I taught forensic science. I love science. I love mysteries. I loved Nancy Drew when I was a kid.
Yes.
And I love Long Island. I had a sailboat at one time, so I knew all about sailing, and I decided when I was teaching the forensic science that I would make my course more interesting for my students by writing case studies. And I would, instead of like taking arson, which is something that you study, arson evidence in forensic science, I would write a story where there was an arson crime, and I would put characters in it.
That's great.
And once I put the characters in it, once you put characters into something, you begin to become attached, because the characters are always from your life somewhere, or they're you. And
That's true.
so I said to myself, you know, these stories are pretty good. And then I went to the library and I took out a couple of teenage mystery, young adult mystery stories, and I said, my stories are better. I mean, I didn't read them all, but the
Right.
ones, I said, my stories are interesting.
Right.
So I decided to write the books. And what happens in the Madonna Ghost is that Annie goes to Fire Island on vacation with her aunt, which I call Aunt, because I'm from New York. And her name is Aunt Jill. She's a New York City police detective. This is how Annie gets into trouble.
Right.
And she meets a boy, and she falls in love, and together with a local historian, they investigate the ghost. And in investigating the ghost, they uncover a very, very nasty plot, which I can't tell you about.
Oh, no.
And then in the second book takes place in Brooklyn and Manhattan, and I love the city. So these are things I
could
know.
see that in your
I
book,
mean,
yes.
I have some scenes in the subway. I know the subway
Yes.
system. So these are all things that I
Right.
know, because people said to me, how did you do the research? Well, I taught forensic science. I didn't have to
Yes.
research that
Right.
at all. And then I wrote about places that I knew. Now, I finished the first draft of a third one called Secrets in the Fairy Chimneys. Secrets in the Fairy Chimneys takes place in Turkey. Well, I did go to Turkey, but I never lived in Turkey. That book took me 3 times as long to write, simply because I had to do research. I had to really research what I was talking about, because this takes place in an archaeological dig, and of course I had to know it, and I certainly have never been to one, although
Right.
I would love to spend a summer, bent over with a toothbrush.
Well, that makes one of us. I don't know if I could do the toothbrush.
So, okay, what
So,
makes for
yes.
what is it that makes for a strong female role model? So you tell me what is true of Jackie, and I'll tell you what I think is true of Annie.
Well, actually, I wanted to share with you. I reached out to my Facebook readers, and I asked them that very question earlier today. And I would like us to compare notes. I think our girls definitely have a lot in common.
Spunky little devils.
They're stubborn. Of course, they're smart, and they're pretty, and they will get
I try
their
to play
way.
that down, though. I try to play down
Same.
the physical. I want
Yes.
her to be attractive without being stunning.
Exactly.
Because I think that's intimidating to girls.
It is, yeah.
One of the editorial comments I got when I wrote these books was, you don't describe Annie. And I describe her in roundabout ways, and
Yes.
I said I don't want to describe her because I want the girls who read these books to create their own image of Annie.
Yes, I loved how you described Annie in Girl with Pencil Drawing through the eyes of the art teacher. I thought that was fabulous, who sort of looked at her bone structure and said, the way your hollows of your cheekbones, et cetera, beneath the cheekbones, your hair has this kind of line. I thought that was actually pretty brilliant.
Well, that's why,
so-
and I never said she was beautiful. No one ever said she
Right.
was beautiful, and I always have. That's the other thing that I do. I have Annie eating all the time. She's always hungry, and she's always
Good.
eating.
Oh my
But because there's always these eating disorder problems, and I
very
want them to
true.
know that it's healthy to eat. But then you have to run around or be chased by somebody so that you burn off those
There you
calories.
have-
That was really, very prominent in my mind. I wanted a
You were
healthy
conscious about
girl.
that? While you were writing it,
Oh,
you were
absolutely.
conscious, okay, now she's going to have a meal, Yes. Okay, wonderful. Wow, okay, so we do have these strong characters. So let me tell you what my readers said.
Yes,
Okay,
please.
from Princeton, New Jersey, Jessica Dury wrote, a girl who knows herself, a strong girl, is a girl who knows herself and is comfortable with who she is. I have a few over here I'll share with you. Kathy Kerr from Maryland. She is a strong girl, is confident, self-reliant, and empathetic. I thought that was interesting. I do have some male readers. Gary Elgort from Arizona said, a strong girl has self-awareness. But then he took issue with the question. He said, I wonder if the question is sexist. What do you mean by strong girl? Isn't
That's an
strength?
interesting answer.
I thought so, and I will say I know a little bit about him. He is a friend who used to live on Long Island, Gary, and he has a 3rd-degree black belt, and his daughter, I would never mess with her. She's in her 20s, she has a 2nd-degree black belt, so he certainly didn't, there was no gender issue when it came to strengthening strength in martial arts. Beth from Tennessee, who's a college professor, wrote that a strong girl is not the stereotypical helpless female, which I thought was interesting. I had a conversation with an English teacher out here on Long Island earlier this week. I told her that we would actually bring up this topic, and she said, please take a look at the fact that maybe strong women don't follow the typical Disney plot of wanting to be saved. And we have definitely created heroines who are determined to make their own fates, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yes, and so those were some. Steve Corso from New York, everyday strong girl has everyday perseverance and can overcome obstacles because life will throw them to you.
See, I like that one because I'm thinking of both Jackie and Annie, and I'm thinking both of them are really not all that confident. They're at that time in their lives where they're finding themselves. Annie has problems with her parents. Her mother is an alcoholic. She's in and out of rehab, so she's not present for Annie. Her father works for the State Department, so he's rarely ever home. So she has real issues with them. She's angry about it, but she is determined to have her own life. And I think it's determination, the ability. I loved the comment about empathetic because there's a scene in the Madonna Ghost where they're finding out about the ghost, and the ghost is very tragic, and Annie is very, very caught up by it, and she's feeling very badly for the ghost and the ghost's child. So I think that those are important characteristics, and I like perseverance and intelligence. And it's the ability to open your mind. Jackie, in particular, who opened the book, man, most of the people in the world would have slammed that book shut. I'm not going. What are you talking about, time travel? I would be separated from my hairdryer? Good heavens, no. So, these are women who have young women who have a real sense of adventure. I want to find out about that.
Exactly. And there's the determination to find the truth, whatever it is. And as writers, we do this too. And again, here, back to the issue of putting ourselves in our characters when we write, isn't it true that we're looking for answers? And as are they. And teens especially, this is especially important. Again, as a mother and a teacher, I feel this very strongly. The need for a young girl to be self-determined. I have to share with you, when my daughter was a toddler, we had this little chant. And here she was about 2 years old. And we're girls, we're smart, and we're strong. And we would just do this every once in a while. And I was just determined to make sure that she grew up in a world that knew no boundaries. That is what my parents did for us, for me and my 2 sisters. And it was the best gift ever.
Absolutely.
You're not confined, you're not a stereotype, and certainly this is what we try to do.
That was a little harder for my generation. We were very stereotyped, but many, many, many of us managed to find our own paths.
Thank goodness.
Now, the next thing that I think we need to address is the fact that as all authors and all published authors have to do, we have to find a marketing platform. So you found a unique marketing platform, I think.
Yes, I have to say, I was driven to write this series because of my students. And actually,
talk about what you taught.
So I taught AP World History and IB History, but AP World History was a new